Hello and welcome to Meet Your Inspiration podcast with Mary and Rich. Today we are very happy to welcome our first international guest. Ria Story is an international leadership speaker, writer, an incredible woman who is so kind to us and very approachable. And she came and joined our podcast today.
Hi Ria, how you doing?
Oh, I'm so glad to be here, Rich and Mary. It's just a privilege.
Fantastic. Now we know you run a company called the Blue Collar Leadership Training Company, which is based in Georgia. So you're close to Atlanta, I think, in the United States. So you and
That's
Mac
that's
travel
it.
all over the world, all over the America and Canada as well, I think.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, he's definitely more of the blue collar side, but we enjoy speaking together and have done so for quite a few years. And so it is just a privilege. And the principles are the same, regardless of what type of group. The stories we share might change, but the principles are the same. So yeah, it's just fun. And you got to know when you live, work, and travel with the same person 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you got to do way more than love that person. You actually have to like them.
That's a good point. And I guess you like him very much indeed because you spend so much time together.
Yes. That's what
Fantastic.
that's we got married because we like each other. So that's good. We enjoy spending the time together.
For
Very
how
good.
long you're
Excellent.
working together, and obviously you know each other?
Um, well, we've been together going almost 24 years, but we have been working
Wow.
full time together since the beginning of 2014. So definitely a different phase.
10
And
years?
there was a
Wow.
learning curve. I will say there was a bit of a learning curve, mostly on my part, but we figured that out.
That's great. Obviously, one of the key questions is always that we want to understand what drive you to this remarkable career that you've got and how all start for you.
Well, I think what drove or what drives me today and my passion for teaching leadership and personal growth is, all growing up and throughout my career, throughout the trainings and the college degrees and all of the formal training and education that I had a lot of management classes and some that would even been called leadership classes, but really nobody ever talked about leadership as absolutely the way that we influence people, right? The way we define leadership is influence. And no one ever talked about how to influence people. We talked a lot about strategic plans and organizational charts. And, those are good things and things we need to learn leading an organization. But the skill of influencing people is something that we all need. It's critical for life. And what I learned is that number one, all of us have some influence, but number two, all of us want more influence. Anytime in life when we're mad or sad or upset or frustrated, it's because we didn't have enough influence in the situation and we want more influence. And so when I realized that influence is something that we can develop, but it starts with leadership of self. And that's when I really became passionate about helping other people understand that how they lead themselves is determining how they influence other people. And boy, my life would have been different if I had learned these rules much earlier in my career. But no, I can't go back, but hopefully I can help someone else accelerate their journey. And I get excited about these leadership principles, not because I read them in a book, but because I've applied them to my life and gotten results. And so that's where my passion for talking about leadership and personal growth is. I know it works. It's like gravity. Gravity is a principle. And if you know how to work with gravity instead of against gravity, life can be better. Life is always better when we have more influence, more options, and more opportunities.
Can I ask you, like, how did the whole journey start? How did like, obviously, yeah, you started off like with school, and how did that your early life start? Was that easy or a difficult time?
Life was very tough for me early on. I was sexually abused from my father from age 12. So I left home at 19. I didn't have a job. I didn't have any money. I didn't have a high school diploma because I'd never been to school. And I left home. I had a duffel bag and a pillowcase stuffed with clothes. And when I was 19, I met my knight in a shiny Camaro. And we've long since traded the Camaro, but I married him. And I wouldn't have been able to articulate it, but what I knew is that when I left home, I could spend the rest of my life blaming a lack of success on what happened to me. And I could certainly take that route of playing the victim, or I could choose to rise above it. And so what I say today is that what happens to us is not as important as who we become because of it. And bitter or better is not an easy choice, but it's absolutely a choice. And so after I left home, I had to go get my GED, and the only job I could find was working as a waitress. And I speak for a lot of kids and youth groups today, and I always ask them, I'm like, how much money do you think I was making? And they're like, oh, $10 an hour, $12 an hour. I'm like, no, $2.13 an hour to pick up half-eaten pizza crusts and bus dirty tables. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all start somewhere, and that's where I started. But it didn't take me long to realize two things. Number one, that's not what I wanted to do the rest of my life. And number two, the job of my dreams wasn't going to come find me at a pizza restaurant. So much of the time we want life to be different, but we have to realize that we have to take the ownership and responsibility for making the choices and decisions and putting in the work that can make our dreams a reality. So I went to college. I got my college degree. I got another job. I worked my way up, and life was good. I would have considered myself successful. But in 2013, I heard Les Brown speak, and he's a fabulous motivational speaker. And he's speaking to a whole room full of people. But he says to this whole room full of people, he says, you have a story to share, and someone needs to hear your story, and you can help them. And I thought, I have a story to share, but I don't want to share it. I worked really hard. Because after I left home, I didn't talk about my story. I worked really hard to just leave the past behind. I didn't want people to see me as a victim. So I didn't talk about it. Beyond a few family members and close friends, I didn't talk about my experiences as a teenager.
It's huge baggage. And I know obviously everyone around you think they'll have an amazing story. And for you, it must have been just so hard to be able to have the courage to sort of share that.
It was. And it took me 6 months after thinking about it and pondering on it. And I finally did got the courage up to share. And I realized that when I started to own my story, it didn't own me any longer. And that was the victory, right? In saying, you know what? It's a chapter of my story. It's not a great chapter. It's a bad chapter. But if I can use it to help somebody else and inspire them, then what's a terrible, awful thing turned into something for the benefit of someone else? It can become a positive. And it absolutely is true that what happens to us influences us. It doesn't determine us, but it can influence us. But it's up to us to decide how. How does it refine us? Because it doesn't define us. So that was back in 2013 when I shared my story for the first time, and realizing that I had up until that point been pursuing a career, but now I was pursuing a calling. And so I resigned from that job I'd gone to college for 10 years to get. And I recognized that I couldn't pursue a calling if I was chasing a career. And I think I had the impression that you just put on your LinkedIn profile, speaker, leadership trainer, and people just hire you to speak. It doesn't work like that. There were some, definitely some rough bumps in the road. Mac and I were on a similar timeline of he was transitioning from consulting into the leadership space, and I wanted to move into, talking about leadership and personal growth as a speaker. And so we were on a similar trajectory, in that both within a year of each other, we both gave up our successful careers. We cashed in our 401k, our retirement. We sold our house and the Hummer and the Corvette and the Ford Raptor and the pool, because we literally gave up everything. Because you don't go from two very successful careers to losing $30,000 the first year without making some lifestyle choice changes. And there was some ramen noodle months or years. Mac used to say, he said, I am so passionate about this. I would go live under a bridge to make this happen. And I'm like, I'm not living under the bridge. You are going to have to figure this out before we get to the bridge. And we didn't have to live under a bridge. We did move to a tiny apartment for a while, but at the end of the day, we were happier than we'd ever been.
Ria, how did you find the credibility? One of the things you said there, obviously, when you start doing leadership training, obviously one of the hardest things is to get that credibility in the first place. and to be able to then reach out to the people and say, look, we can come and we can really help you.
I think the number one way, even today, that we offer credibility is just our results, right? And Mac and I teach the leadership principles, but we share a lot of stories, a lot of examples from our lives of where we got it right, where we got it wrong. Because I think that that's what connects to people is real stories that they can learn from. And that has been the number one comment that we hear even when we speak today, is that our authenticity is what people really can relate to. But it did take a while to build a lot of that credibility, to write a lot of leadership articles, and then we started writing leadership books. And of course, the more that you do that, and the more that people can learn from your content, and you add value to people through articles and books and podcasts and things like that, then you can start to build a network where you're the resource. And if you do that often enough and long enough, adding value to enough people, then the rest of it simply takes care of itself.
What makes you to go to that Les Brown talk then? What was that reason that drive you to go?
Well, Mac and I had signed up for a leadership certification with John Maxwell. He's one of the world's top leadership experts. And Les Brown was at that event as part of one of the speakers for the event. So it was, it was almost a serendipity, because we might not have seen him or heard him speak otherwise. And at the time, I was very happy in my career. I was working in a hospital, working in compliance, and I had risen to a level of success in the organization, great organization. I had a good boss. I had good leaders. And, Mac was shifting from consulting into the leadership space. And so he was like, just come attend this conference and attend this certification. He's like, even if you don't want to be, because at the time I was like, I like what I'm doing. I don't want to go be a leadership trainer or speaker. And he's like, but it'll still help you, right? If you still learn the material, it'll help you even in your role and what you do now. And he was 100% right in that. But it's one of those things that when you start to grow in one area of your life, that's going to continue to help you grow in other areas of your life. And that led me to have the courage to share my story. And then, of course, it was just another short step until stepping off into this space full time.
Wow.
That's crazy. Back in the time, because nowadays there are lots of speakers. You can see, even if I must be honest, sometimes, as you mentioned earlier, on LinkedIn, I think lots of people do write either coaching, either speaking on their profiles, but it's not really, you don't have actually the idea how much they are into this and what training they had or what knowledge as well. So I would say that nowadays is quite popular, and people, even with after 2 talks, probably they will add sometimes that they become really good speakers. Back in the time, it wasn't, I believe, that much, or at least not in Europe. Probably in US was very popular, or it was just the beginning of starting this wave of coaching, leadership talks, inspiration. What was back then?
There was quite a bit. There are quite a bit of speakers who have focused on that for a long time here. But what I see is that most of them are trying to teach leadership principles to top level executives, because a lot of people are in this space for money. And most of the time, Mac and I speak for free. We have what we call our special offer, where if people buy books from us, our books direct from us, then we travel anywhere in the United States and speak for up to 2 hours for free. And we pay our expenses out of that. So they buy the books. That right now it's 300, but it changes every year. But if they buy the 300 books from us, they get the books, and then we'll come speak for free, because we're more interested in making a difference. Right? That's why we got into this. That's why we're passionate about this. And I'd much rather leave somebody with a resource and a book after the event, because transformation doesn't happen in one day. It happens every day. And so it doesn't matter how great a keynote speech is, but we want to leave people with a resource for growth afterward. But I see a lot of speakers who get into, just trying to get big keynote speaking opportunities, and there's nothing wrong with that.
No, everybody are different.
That's what
got different
everyone's
approaches.
different.
So yeah.
So what we did was we take a lot of those. Oh, go ahead. I was just saying that what we like to do is take the same leadership principles and just put them in easy to understand stories and examples that real people can relate to.
Something that I really like when you start the conversation was about that we don't realize that the leadership and obviously the inspiration is all around and is starting with us. And we don't realize how much we influence the people around us as well.
Mm.
Because recently, since I started this project, there were quite a few friends who sent me really nice and kind messages where they were mentioning that, oh, that was always you. You've done this for me. You've done this for me in the past, and now you're doing it in a bigger project. And you sit down and you think, like, did I really? Because we don't realize on a daily basis what influence we've got on other people around us. And I really like that you made a note about that. That really probably, I know leadership usually it's a topic and ladder of influence. I would say it's usually a topic for top management and senior management, but the reality is that we all on that page. And with Richard, we made the effort definitely to read the book, The Five Steps, The Ladder of Influence. And we found it really incredible. And we definitely recommend to everybody to find and to read because it's a really easy read and it's giving lots of value on for everybody. So yeah, I understand that there are lots of other books, so we need to catch up with them. But about the ladder of influence and talking about us, I've got one question that I need to ask the author.
Sure.
I think it was the first step where we talk about
Control of
self-worth or
self.
work control. Okay. What will be your advice? If I think it was written somewhere there that if there is a conflict situation, let's say, to keep your influence and to keep your influence levels, you have to calm down and to try to find the solution in a easy way, even if it's sometimes if you have to step back. Here, or probably this is what I understand from the example. I wouldn't say too much about it because it's everybody can read and find out for them. But if there is a conflict situation, which is definitely against my values or my beliefs, do you think that if I stand behind my thoughts and what I think it's right, this can harm my influence?
That's a great point, Mary. Um, yes, at the end of the day, there are going to be situations where when you stand up for your values and your beliefs, there's going to be somebody who just doesn't agree with that. And the difference is that they have different values than you do. And that's okay, right? Every person has the right to choose their own values. And what we find is that if we don't have shared values, it's much more difficult to build influence with that person. However, it's more important for us to be intentional about our values and then have integrity to live by them and realize that there are going to be some people who don't necessarily share them. For example, if somebody is a thief and you're not a thief, then you're not going to have as much influence with that person because there's a fundamental conflict of values. So it's recognizing that we can be intentional about our values and then there again, having the courage and integrity to live true to them, knowing that there will be some people that we cannot build as much trust and influence with. But I'm not interested in building trust and influence with those people who we call them low impact leaders, right? I would rather build a high degree of influence with people who have developed their character and have positive influence. Influence can go either way, positive or negative, right? When I talk about influence, I'm talking about it from the perspective of high influence, high impact influence, and character, influence based on developed character. So that's a great point, Mary. I talk about in the book there are there are going to be a few people that you simply cannot influence. They're not interested in sharing values or sharing respect or having mutual respect. Don't worry about those people, right? Most of the time, not always, but most of the time, if we learn to increase our influence and again, develop our character, we might can build some trust and influence even with those people around us we think we may not be able to, simply by, again, staying true to positive character attributes, right? And living them, being the example. But there are going to be a few
Yes.
people in life that you run across that simply do not share your values. And again, don't focus on those.
It's just, yeah, usually I assume when you put some people to work together, mostly I believe there are the moments where you've got different values, different
Mm.
personalities, and there is a bit of clash. And yeah, because if, as you said, you don't underestimate anyone else, but at the end of the day, you have to, yeah, um, keep backing up yourself. And if you always stand
Mm.
and you've got one belief or value, I assume you have to keep it. And probably this is coming some other points or kind of coaching that how to find to work in difficult situations and to deal with. But it was very interesting, the point about the influence, and makes you definitely to think about that we all influence each other a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing, too, is I think that's why it's so important for leaders and organizations to be intentional about developing their team members, because it's the leader's responsibility to lead the team. And that means as the leader, I need to say, what are the values of our organization? And then I need to be intentional about selecting people who have those values, right? Hiring for the character attributes that I want, that are in good alignment with where we are as an organization, where we want to go. Because it's sort of like, who we are is who we attract, right? So what we see a lot of times is that organizations, particularly here in the United States, I don't know to what degree it's the same there in the UK, but a lot of times people in organizations in the United States will say, oh, we just can't find any good people, right? We have trouble finding employees that are engaged, or when we do, they won't stay, right? There's retention issues, there's low morale, or employees who are just not engaged. But number one, that's the leader's responsibility, right? The culture of the organization is just a collection of the character of everyone who's working there, but it starts at the top. And the leader is responsible for A, developing the people who are working there, but B, hiring for the character attributes that you want. And so most of the time, however, people focus on competency. Competency is knowledge, skills, talents, and we need those, particularly in a workforce, right? That's what we get paid for, is our ability to do the job. But most of the time we see that people get hired for what they know, competency, but fired for who they are, character, right? Character is attitude, integrity, teamwork. Can I get along with my coworkers, right? 87% of our results in life and our success and our influence with other people is based on character, who we are as a person. But what we find is that most people are looking for team members based on competency, but all of their problems are on the character side, and we don't talk about character. We don't develop character a lot of times in organizations, and then we wonder why we have so many people problems. So
Absolutely.
that's what, why Mac and I focus on helping leaders understand that leadership starts at the top, and that's a responsibility that the leader takes ownership of and says, the team is exactly where I'm leading them because I'm the leader. They can't go anywhere else.
Oh yeah.
They really need to understand that skill set to be able to be a good leader. And often a lot of people, they don't necessarily have those skills initially. So when they get into that job, they may be an entrepreneur, so they may not have, they may have just had the idea and developed it, but obviously they need to develop that idea properly to create the right culture.
You're exactly right, Richard. And
We
and most of the time these aren't bad people, right? It's just that we often see leaders get into a leadership role because they're good at doing the work, at running a business or getting the work done. And so we take that person and we put them in a position of authority, but it's a different skill set to go from me doing the work to inspiring you to do the work. And leaders ironically don't often study leadership. It'd be like a math professor who never studied math, but it's true. A lot of leaders aren't intentional about developing their leadership skills. And it's sad because they don't realize that the difference in productivity between someone following a leader because they want to and someone because they have to is as much as 40%, right? If I don't if I don't want to follow my leader, I won't go the extra inch, forget the extra mile, right? The little things that are above and beyond. And leaders often don't realize how much they're leaving on the table in terms of engaging and developing their people and building their influence with them based on true moral true moral influence instead of authority based on the role as the boss.
Ria, do you think that anyone can be a leader, or just some people are natural leaders? They just need a little bit, probably help, and they will become even and flourish even better. And just some people can be leaders, or you've got different opinion.
I I think that everyone has influence. And so when we define leadership as influence, all of us are leaders at some level, either personally, at home, with our kids, our spouse, and certainly professionally, we can influence even our coworkers or team members or our boss. It certainly influence can go up as well. Now, I do believe there are some people who have some natural abilities that might give them a head start when it comes to influence. Because influence is based on relationships. Relationships are built on trust, right? If you don't know me very well, you're not going to trust me very much. And so some people certainly have more of a maybe a natural head start in the characteristics that help them be effective at building relationships or living with integrity and being trustworthy, right? But absolutely, leadership is a skill. I would have said I was not a natural leader, but when I learned that I could be intentional about developing the skill, I could increase my influence. It takes time, certainly. It takes work, right? But we all have the potential to increase influence. And when we have more influence, life does get better. More options and more opportunities always come when we have more influence.
The key thing is obviously the character of the leader, but also the character of the people you're teaching as well, or to influence to get them to do the right work.
Yeah, that's very true. And there again, we come back to if I'm the leader of an organization, I want to look for the characteristics that are high character, things like someone who has a good attitude or someone who can control their emotions. We're talking about my book, The Ladder of Influence. Control of self is the first step. So if I'm the leader in an organization, I want to look for people who have some ability to master that control of self, particularly when things go wrong, right? Um, Equally talented employees, but if one of them has the ability to master their emotions when a customer gets mad, that person is going to help move the organization forward and much, much better, much faster than someone who blows up at the customer every time the customer has a complaint, right? And so, yeah, absolutely. It's important that we're intentional about developing our own character as a leader, because I cannot give someone what I don't have. And, if I'm not growing as a leader, the team won't be growing because they can't grow any farther than my ability to lead them.
One of the latest guests that we had, she actually made really good point. She said that the skills are transferable and you can always teach your staff the skills, but you can't teach them good attitude. And what she's always looking for is exactly what you mentioned, that she doesn't go only about the skills. She wants to make sure that that personality and that person will fit the team that they already got and create. So you don't need to be the best one in terms of the skill set, because it's something that you can always learn. But as a personality, that she's definitely a great leader. And now obviously we can see where the leader mindset is the same with Lisa, our latest guest, I think was. And yeah, one is leadership speaker. So fantastic. hopefully, yeah, more and more people will look a bit more into this and will learn, because I know there are lots of quotes and talks about leadership and inspiration, but we actually really need to learn the basics, let's say, and to pass the message around. This is why we create this project, because yeah, sometimes people were asking us what you want to achieve. We are not creating something new. I know that exists, but it's great to share it and to show that it's not only leadership and inspiration and mentoring, only how we mention just the top management or people who achieve top positions. This can be anyone who is around us. So exactly, that's the key of the project. And guests like you
I
are
love that.
absolutely goat, goat luck.
Well,
Because
you're
yeah,
you're too
this
kind.
is from the. But no, I'm obviously we really like Simon Sinek. Is he quite famous there? Yeah, we love him and we
I
like.
would say he's very well known.
Yeah, he's great, and I like as well his approach and how he talked to the people, because it's not in a. It's exactly such a nice informal way, where he let emotions to talk as well, and he's got lots of variety of guests who are sharing. So it's great influence as well for everyone around.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got some really great. I think his book Leaders Eat Last was a phenomenal leadership book when it really talks about the principles of why leadership is important and why
Why?
why to
Why
begin
is the
with
great
is
question?
leadership possible?
Yeah.
Yes.
Going back to the ladder of influence, Ria, if we go through the steps, so obviously you mentioned, so the first step was about self-control, and the second step was about character development. So that's the next one, if I remember, was competency, I think. Is that right? And
Yep, that's
do you want
exactly
to sort of
right.
like share the next steps?
Sure. So those are the first three, right? And those first three steps are really about myself as an individual, right? Learning to master control of self and then develop my character and competency. And then what we see is that at step 4, there's a little bit of a shift. So step 4 is commitment to developing others. And this is where I, as an individual, turn around and I help somebody else learn to climb the ladder of influence, right? Mentoring someone, developing someone. This could be at work. This could be at home, right? Teaching children could be commitment to developing others. Any type of character development that I'm turning around and handing that to someone else and helping them climb their ladder of influence and helping them be successful as they define it, not as I would define it, but helping them define success and reach that for themselves. And then, so that's a shift, right? That's a shift in values. Suddenly I'm not focused on my success. Now I'm focused on the success of someone else. And not everyone values that. Not everyone will be willing to sacrifice in order to help someone else. But what we see is that influence at that level is much greater. And step number 5 on the ladder of influence is contribution of service over time. And this is a lifetime legacy of pouring into and developing others.
One of the things that we always think about, obviously, is when you're at that last stage and you're obviously, making sure that you're leaving that legacy of the people behind. Obviously, that's the key to the future of the business, because at the end of the day, as someone gets older and more experienced, they tend to sort of move into a more of a role where they're sort of like an ambassador rather than actually running the company on the day to day. So the skill sets they've left behind gives the real future for that business, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And that would be the goal as the top leader in the organization, is to move away from the managing of the organization and focus on just the leadership, because that's the leader should be focused on the things that only he or she could do, right? That's the leadership piece. So that would be the goal. It's difficult to do, certainly, but when we see that lasting legacy of helping someone else be successful and pouring into them and helping them develop their own influence, a legacy isn't something that we leave behind for others. It's something that we leave behind in someone else, right?
Mm.
Because what is the saying that people, I think it's Maya Angelou, who says, people won't remember what you say, but they always remember how you made them feel.
That's right.
Which
Yeah.
is absolutely right. We all remember all these people who influence our lives. So, talking about that, who are your, did you had role models? And who are the people who influence you?
Obviously John Maxwell had a heavy influence on my leadership journey, and some of his leadership materials is phenomenal and certainly has helped me grow. Les Brown influenced me in speaking, and I did a speaker training with Les Brown, and just that certainly helps me and influenced me on the speaking side of things. And I also have, it's a little bit unusual way to look at it, but I think that all of us can have phenomenal role models in the form of the books from people around the world and throughout history, right? We have access to learn from the greatest minds and learn from other people's stories. And so I love to read because that's my preferred way of learning, but it's allowed me to get the best wisdom and insight and advice from so many great people who I would never have the opportunity to meet.
It's interesting because obviously this medium, obviously, because like for not everyone can read, and obviously for us reading is really important because obviously, as you say, we learn so much when we're reading, but not everybody has that ability to read and be able to take the information. And obviously the way we're sharing the information today through the amazing opportunity of the podcast and for people to listen online and to watch and to hear, it's a new way for them to listen and also to find a natural mentoring through this incredible medium, which is phenomenal, really. So it's a great opportunity to share. Obviously, I know you do it yourself, like a weekly podcast, I think, or where you'll share little snippets of inspiration. And how did you start that?
Well, literally, I just sat down one day and started recording. And today, I still do the podcast, and it's another way to reach people. Like you said, it's another way to touch people. Some people don't like to read, so they might never read one of my books, but they might listen to a podcast or watch it, one of my TED videos or watch my videos on YouTube. I think that maybe the question you're asking is where did the thoughts come from to start recording podcasts? I think I'm in my sixth
Yeah,
year for
yeah,
podcasting. When I wrote my first book back in 2014, it was 64 pages and they were 4-inch pages. They were tiny because I didn't have very much to say back then. And it was a struggle to fill up those 64 pages, right? And then the next book was like 100 pages and it was twice as big. And the next book was like 120 pages, right? But what I learned was that the more content that I could learn myself and I could reflect on, the easier it became to have my own content, right? It gave me some principles and some concepts that I could absorb. And then from then I could think about, well, maybe I think about things differently than someone who wrote something, or, it gave me the platform and the knowledge and ability to start developing my own content. So that was a little bit of a process and it took some time. But for me, it comes back to the power of continued growth. I want to be the river, right? I want to pass on to others things that I've learned. But if I'm not learning and growing, I won't be able to turn around and give somebody else knowledge that I don't have. So I'm intentional with my growth. My personal growth commitment is 50 nonfiction books a year. So about one a week.
wow,
Wow.
that's
Are
some
you
serious
managing
reading.
with this busy life?
Absolutely. Well,
Wow.
I mean, I do enjoy reading, so that makes it easier. But yeah, it's something that I find just being intentional with that goal helps me be mindful of regularly. I might not read all day, but every day.
Obviously, every opportunity you got to read. Oh, this is great. This is another thing that we can notice in our guests, that all of them are talking about personal development, and doesn't
Mm.
matter how successful they are and on good stage they reach in their life, they keep learning. Us too, we are the same. Some of my friends are telling me that. Am I planning to stop anytime? And I don't think I won't, because as you said, we are learning so much, and there is never enough. The school or the university can be your last stop, and that's it. You get in the job, and this is it. No, I think we have to be open-minded and to carry on and to learn as much as we can, and to surround with the right people, because
Mm.
I strongly believe that it's very important the people that you are surrounded by. But again, we
It's
come
one of our
probably
great
to the
privileges.
point how they influence us and we influence them. So yeah, again, we're coming to that circle. But if I must be honest, before I didn't think about their influence. I was always thinking about, oh, they make me feel good. They obviously boost me. They teach me, but I never look on them as influence for me, where obviously, look, where is coming everything is one circle, and it's how about influence, but we just don't realize that.
Mm. Very true.
Maria, one of the things I think we've noticed, and I'm sure you notice as well when you're doing your presentations and you're talking to people, everyone's got a bit of a story. And obviously through the podcast, obviously we're hearing so much inspirational ideas, thought processes, and people's roots. And obviously as you're, I guess, as you're talking to people and they're asking questions, it opens up new bits of information and research for you and lots of new examples that I guess you can then use as you build your influence, because obviously everyone's got that story that you can add in.
Yeah, I think everyone goes through adversity in life. You know, life is tough, right? And we always say that if you haven't gone through adversity, just hang on. It's coming. Right?
Mm.
um, but not everyone wants to share all of the chapters of their stories, or be on stage or write a book about them, and that's okay. But what we find is that what is universal is that when we go through adversity, we can simply go through it, or we can grow through it, right? We can,
Mm.
we've all heard the term post-traumatic stress. Well, I'm a big fan of post-traumatic growth as well, right? We can grow from an experience, but I'm much bigger fan of pre-traumatic growth. Like, why don't we grow and develop ourselves a little every day? Learn one new thing every single day, and I guarantee you will think differently in 365 days this time next year, right? So why can't we grow ourselves a little bit every day so that when we have problems tomorrow, we are better equipped to overcome them? I mean, you think back, we can all think back to when we were a teenager and we thought we had problems at 15 and 16, right? And now you look back and you're like, those were not problems. It's not that the problem has changed, is that you have grown to some degree since then. And so if we apply that concept to the future, we know that life is going to continue to throw us challenges and curves. So why can't I be intentional about my growth today so that I am
Mm.
better equipped to meet those problems? The problems can't grow, but you can.
Absolutely.
Very good point. Trouble is that there are people, as always, there will be always people who don't believe that, and they
Mm.
wouldn't even give a try, because I bet once they try, they will see the other side. But and here probably we come again to the point that we can't change everybody, and probably you can't influence everybody, and whoever is open to that will
Mm-hmm.
find a way. And because it is great, and yeah, I do agree that we need to look a little bit more about it and think about to stop worrying about the things, just to be, yeah, learn something small from someone and carry on, and stop worrying and just trying to find the negative side, because this is the
Mm.
easiest way to sit down on the sofa and to find the negative way, and always to find the reason why something can't be done. But yeah, this is why we are here, to show that it's possible. And I wanted to take
Absolutely.
you back to the time. And what were the feelings? Because you mentioned TED Talks. What was the feeling to go there and to speak in front of all these people, to that quite popular platform?
Um, there was a lot of work that went into my TEDx talk. You know, um, they they gave me, I think, 7 minutes, and the whole concept of TED, I'm sure you are both aware of, is an idea we're sharing, right? It's not just sharing a story, but what's an idea that's worth sharing and giving to someone else. And 7 minutes is not a lot of time to have an idea worth sharing and communicate that idea and share the story that goes along with that. And so you just have to be very intentional. So there was a lot of very intentional thought around what I would say in those 7 minutes, and obviously a lot of time practicing and delivering that. And then the emotions were maybe just awe-inspiring. It was a goal that I had worked for quite a long time, and I had just been turned down and been turned down and been turned down. At some point, I was like, okay, that apparently is not for me, and so I quit applying. And it's funny that that's when I was given the opportunity, right? But I felt a sense of responsibility of, this is an opportunity. I want to be intentional about that and steward it well and honor that because it did feel like an opportunity. And then the next thought is just don't mess up, don't freeze, don't forget to say something, just make sure that you are comfortable enough with what you're saying and what you're sharing that, I think a lot of times people get so tied up in delivering a presentation and getting it just exactly right. But most of the time, if they would be more comfortable focusing on being authentic to themselves and letting what they know come out, they would be much better served in connecting with people. And so for me, that was one of the lessons learned is in learning to speak, is that I don't want to just come across as the perfectly polished speaker, because I'm not, and I'm always going to say things or make mistakes, or, learning to laugh at myself and just say, oh, I said that wrong, or didn't come out right, or I forgot what I was saying. Right. But being comfortable with the material and the concepts that I'm teaching so that they can just come out. I don't have to worry about scripting a 30-minute presentation down to every word these days. And that's a much more comfortable place to talk for. Because a lot of times when you're sharing a principle, you realize that you need to share maybe more than one story to communicate that to the idea of the audience. Now, you couldn't do that in a TEDx talk because you did have to stay within the time frame that they gave you and honor that. But today, Mac and I both tend to teach from a place of share a principle and then share a story, or maybe another story, maybe 2 or 3 stories. But the stories are what people connect to emotionally, and that's where people learn.
When you finish doing those, do you tend to have a question and answer session as well at the end?
You mean when we do our teachings and trainings today?
Yes. Yeah.
It just depends on the audience and the environment. Typically what we just, if someone brought us in to do a 2-hour training, we just say, well, do you want us to take questions at the end? Some people do, some people don't. If it's a conference, they might actually ask you to leave some time for questions. That's actually my favorite way to teach, because then I know it's relevant to the people in the audience. So that actually is one of my favorite ways to be able to speak to the content and the material is, let's answer some questions. So we see a good mix of that. It definitely goes both ways.
I will be taking you again back to the not nice side of your part of your life, but just I'm curious, what drive you to save yourself all these years that obviously you didn't have the choice, and how you find that how you become so strong that you manage to live? Because I know you told us in the conversation first time we met you that you left home just with few clothes or something like that. You just literally probably, well, let's say, with nothing. How strong you were? What makes you that strong to go and do that?
Well, at the time, when I was 19, I met Mac, who was my knight in a shiny Camaro. And I had tried to leave home. I had run away a few times, trying to escape, and that never worked out. My parents would find me and come bring me back. But meeting Mac certainly was the catalyst for giving me the courage to leave and to stay gone. And sometimes we don't always have enough of the belief in ourselves that we can do what we need to do, but sometimes we can borrow that from somebody else. And he has always been my number one cheerleader. He has always supported me 100% of the way in whatever I chose to do. And that's an incredible gift. I mean, a lot of the person that I am today is his influence, and probably goes both ways, I'm sure. But um, if you're a person of faith, I love Les Brown's quote. He says, "Coincidence is God's way of staying anonymous." And when you have that perspective, I think that there was not a coincidence when Mac and I met, and realizing that the odds certainly would have been against us and having a long-term relationship, but he was the person I needed and I was the person he needed. And we've been able to grow together along the way, at different times in different ways and different perspectives and paths. But we've always been intentional about maintaining that growth. And when you see people grow together, they can grow together. So to answer your question, I would not have been able to say all of this back then. I couldn't have told you what made me strong back then. But looking back now, I can see that number one, I was proactive. I couldn't have said it, but I knew from the beginning that I could take what life gave me and be better about it or better because of it. And I wanted to be better because of it. I think it's Myron Golden who said, "Victimhood happens when we let contributing factors become determining factors." We all have things that contribute to our situation, but it's what do we do with the cards that we're dealt that is most important.
Just amazing, strong, and as I said in the beginning, incredible woman that, I'm sure that will give lots of influence to our audience. And this is what we want. Probably that's going to be my last question. What will be your advice to the young people? What advice you would give, or to younger version of Ria?
I always come back to the power of intentional growth, right? Again, you don't have to do it all day, but whether it's listen to a podcast or read a quote or learn, just be intentional about that every single day. Consistency beats intensity every single time. And it's the power of the process that helps us. You don't ever know where personal growth and development will take you, but it's like driving across the country, right? You just drive to the bend in the road and then you can see a little further. Grow a little bit and tomorrow you'll grow a little bit more and you'll be able to see a little bit more, right? Like we physically grow taller, we can see more. It's the same way. If we can emotionally grow ourselves, just be intentional about what that looks like on a regular and consistent basis. And you never know where it can take you. You just have to enjoy the journey.
Yeah, thank you very much. Tell us how can people find you and how can they follow you and keep up with what you guys are both doing over in America?
Sure. You can find me on my website, riastory.com. That's the best way. You're certainly welcome to connect with me on social, Ria Story on LinkedIn or Facebook or X or Instagram. Welcome. I put out tons of motivational quotes and thought-provoking things. So absolutely connect with me. And, I believe in sharing, again, be the river. So I'm always passing on the things that have inspired and helped me.
I just need to mention something here before we finish that obviously it's a message to our audience that we reached to Ria kind of in the beginning when we started this project. And I want to say that everything she talks today and how she presents herself is 100% Ria, because this incredible woman who is so busy with her work, she was fantastic in the reply. And that's why I said she's very approachable, because she come back to us. We had at least one or two meetings online. Obviously, let's not forget the time difference and all this busy around the work. But I want to say a huge thank you, because this makes you as well very authentic, a very kind and nice person, not just in front of the people. This is you, and we really appreciate that. Yeah, you say yes to two new people, absolutely in this area, but with lots of passion to do this project. But yeah, you've been incredible in your response, and yeah, huge thank you from us for your
Thank
time.
you. It's my privilege. My privilege.
I think on Audible and obviously on Amazon, I think they can buy them, and I'm sure
Absolutely.
there's lots of other places as well. So if anyone would like, is curious and they'd like to find particularly the Ladder of Influence, Mary and myself have both read it and listened to it, and we found it so incredibly inspiring. So, and thank you, Ria, it's really good. We hope everyone's really enjoyed the podcast. It's been fascinating for us to hear your story, Ria, and we really hope anyone who's listening, please do, if you're watching on YouTube, please do like, and if you could subscribe, that would be really helpful to us. And if you're listening on Spotify, again, we ask if you would follow us, and please do look out for Ria's podcast too. We'll leave some links underneath this so you can find them too. Ria, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Richard, Mary.